On the edge of the American frontier, where faith met famine, one woman's gift for finding water meant life or exile. I never meant to leave the town of Mercy's Hollow. The leaving happened the way most things do out here, slow, then all at once. One summer, the wells began to sink like punctured lungs, and by the time I could still the whispers about my gift, I was already halfway to the ridge with a pack and my mother's shawl. Folks said I'd called up storms and bent willow branches toward hidden springs. Maybe that was true. I only knew how to listen, to the ground, to the hush before thunder, to the taste of dust that told me something living still stirred underneath. I was 17 then. Now, nearly 10 years on, the wind carries word that Mercy's Hollow is dying of thirst. The rivers turn to a crawl of mud and cattle bawl through cracked lips. A rider found me near the edge of the bluffs yesterday, a boy grown into a man, though I recognized the way he held his reins. James. He said nothing at first, just tipped his hat and let the silence work. Then he told me the town was calling for help. "They'll take you back, Clara," he said. "They'll call you what you were, if you can find the water again." I told him I'd think on it. But that night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the wagon wheels in the wind sounded like someone saying my name. Before dawn, I was packed. I didn't pray. I just started walking east, toward the hollow. The road hadn't changed. Same dust, same scrub stretching toward the red horizon. My boots remembered it better than my heart did. Half a day out, I stopped by an old cottonwood where someone had carved initials, J plus C, a childish act from a season when we believed in promises. The bark had grown thick around the letters, swallowing them the way time swallows everything. By noon, heat pressed down like an anvil. A mule cart rattled past carrying barrels that sounded too light when they thudded. A woman sat on top, face wrapped in linen, eyes squinting. She didn't know me until I lifted my hand. Then her eyes widened. "Clara?" she called. "Lord above, it's you." "Hello, Mary," I said, voice catching. She was older now, cheeks hollowed, but still the same sturdy kindness about her. She climbed down, hugged me tight despite the dust between us. "They'll be glad you came," she said, "even if they don't know it yet." We walked beside her cart, talking of small things. Weather, crops, who'd married whom. I asked about her son, George. She said he'd gone north looking for better pasture. Her husband still ran the smithy, though the forge lay cold more often now. "No water to cool the metal," she murmured. "Everything's brittle." She looked at me sideways. "They shouldn't have sent you away, Clara. Not for what you couldn't explain." I shrugged. People fear what they can't measure. When the rooftops appeared, little more than rusted tin against the shimmer, I felt my stomach knot. Mercy's Hollow looked smaller, like it had been shrinking while I was gone. Dust coated everything. The well pumps, the window ledges, even the bell that used to ring for supper. Folks paused in their chores to watch me pass. Some nodded politely. Others turned away. It didn't matter. I wasn't here to be liked. The meeting took place in the church, because where else would they put a sinner and a miracle in the same room? The preacher, William Harlan, still wore his collar too tight. He studied me as if I were scripture needing correction. "You claim to have a talent," he said, "a divining sense." "I never claimed," I answered. "I just find water when I listen." The room murmured. Old Frank, who'd once sold me eggs, crossed his arms. "Listening won't fill a trough," he muttered. James stepped forward. "She found us this spring after the fire, remember?" His voice was steady, but I saw the plea in his eyes. The preacher cleared his throat. "Very well. We've prayed, we've dug, we've rationed, till the children cry at night, if there's even a chance." He looked at me again. You'll be watched, of course. Wouldn't have it any other way, I said. They gave me a mule, a shovel, and 2 boys to carry barrels. I asked for silence, which they granted half-heartedly until we reached the outskirts. Then the ground itself quieted them. The air was brittle, holding its breath. I knelt, pressed my palm flat on the dirt. It was warm, trembling faintly with something deeper than wind. Beneath the dryness, I felt a pulse, not of life yet, but of memory. We followed that whisper through canyons of cracked clay. By sundown, we reached a low valley where sagebrush grew in stubborn clusters. I told the boys to start digging near a pale outcrop that shimmered faintly in the dying light. They laughed until the first shovel hit dampness. Their laughter turned to gasps. Mud, real mud, clung to the blade. Keep going, I said, slow and steady. They worked till stars appeared, shoulders slick with sweat. When a trickle pooled at the bottom, one boy fell to his knees and drank straight from it. I pulled him back gently. Let it rise on its own, I warned. Water's shy. By morning, the pool had deepened to a mirror's worth. The townsfolk came running, filling buckets, crying, laughing, praying. Some touched my hands. Others made the sign of the cross as if I might vanish. The preacher stood apart, hat in hand. Perhaps, he said softly, the Lord works in ways we can't name. I smiled thinly. He always has. They built a small fence around the spring, and life began to hum again. Children splashed, women scrubbed clothes, men poured the water over parched fields. Yet relief carries its own kind of silence, the kind that waits to see if the gift will last. I knew it wouldn't, not unless they learned to respect what they drew from. For 3 days I stayed near the spring, listening. At night coyotes sang, and I felt something old stirring under the soil, restless. The 4th evening, James brought me supper, a tin of beans, a crust of bread. He sat beside me without asking. The sunset bled across his face in copper lines. You're still the same, he said. Not quite. He nodded, chewing slow. I used to think what you did was magic. And now? Now I think you just pay attention better than the rest of us. I liked that. We sat till the stars burned through the dusk. When he left, he said, if you ever decide to stay, the town could use more of that attention. I didn't answer right away. I watched the water ripple in the lanternlight, faint as breath. Then I whispered to no one, we'll see. The next morning, a strange wind blew from the west, cool, carrying the scent of rain, but it wasn't rain that came. Dust rose again, heavy, choking. The spring clouded over. The people panicked, thinking it had died. The preacher called it punishment. The men argued. The women cried. I said nothing until I felt the ground again. The pulse was moving, deeper, fleeing the noise. It's shifting, I told them. The earth's thirsty, too. They stared like I'd spoken madness, but I'd felt this once before. The way underground veins twist when drawn too fast. The water had withdrawn to heal. If we chased it with greed, we'd lose it for good. That night, I walked alone to the ridge above the town. The stars were sharp enough to cut. I could see every roof, every lantern flickering below like a heartbeat. Mercy's Hollow was alive again, but only barely. I sank to my knees, pressed my palms into the dust, and whispered what I remembered from my mother's old songs. Half prayer, half promise. The wind shifted. Somewhere beneath, a deep hum answered. I felt tears, hot and quiet, slip down my cheeks. Not sadness. Relief. For the first time since I'd left, I felt the land listen back. When dawn came, I walked back down with a new certainty forming in me, something I couldn't yet name. The people were waiting, faces pinched with fear. "Did it leave us?" Mary asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "It's waiting to see what kind of people we'll be." They didn't understand, not yet. But understanding takes time, and the land gives no shortcuts. James found me by the spring fence with my sleeves rolled and my mother's shawl tied off as a headscarf to keep the sun from biting. The pool was clear again, but smaller, like a cautious eye half open. Folks had crept in with cups at first light, testing. I'd sent them home. "Let the spring breathe," I'd said. "Water is shy." They didn't like it, but they left. He leaned on the fence rail, hat tipped back. "They want you at the church," he said. "William's called a meeting." His voice carried no push, only the information, same as when you tell a man his fence is down. "What do they plan to decide without asking the water?" I asked. He smiled a little. "That'll be your question to put." Inside the church, the air held old wood and damp wool. Faces turned as I stepped in, Mary near the back with a basket of mending. Old Frank stiff as a fence post, Bertha with her hands folded high like a gate, pulled too tight. The preacher stood at the front with a ledger open, pages blank as a dry sky. He nodded at me. "Clara," he said, voice smooth as river rock, "we're grateful for what you've helped us find. The town must think on how to use it, fair and orderly." I took my place at the center aisle, palms idle on the shawl knot. "Orderly is good," I said. "Fair is better, but there's something else before both. Patience." I let the words sit. "That spring will vanish if you draw like men taking spoils. We'll need to pull by measure and rest by measure. We'll need diggings in the right places to share the pressure." Murmurs rose. Frank snorted. "Pulling by measure, don't feed a cow, girl." "It keeps the cow alive past a week," I said. "We can widen the pool, but careful, and lay stone at the lip so the edges don't cave. Then we cut a shallow trench toward the old creek bed and set a series of seep holes. Small cups, spaced proper. Draw at dawn and dusk. Let noon pass. The ground hates a frenzy." Bertha's mouth made a pinched O. "You speak like you own it." "I speak like I listen to it," I said. William lifted a hand. "We'll need ration slips then. The council can write out marks and allotments. Stamp 'em with the church seal. Marks." The words soured the air. I thought of when I'd left, the talk of marks and signs, and who carried the wrong ones. I kept my face even. "Marks can help," I said slowly. "But marks without custom make folks mean. Better to set a rule that even a stranger can understand." Mary's voice rose, tired but steady. "Tell us the rule, Clara." 2 buckets per household at dawn, 1 at dusk," I said. "Livestock on the second day. Wash water saved for gardens. Cisterns under shade, never in bare sun. If you've got a barrel, paint it dark and keep it covered. Use clay to seal the joints. If a child's sick or a mother's nursing, neighbors give from their portion without ledger." Silence took the room. Not resistance. Thought. James broke it. "It's what we do when there's a blizzard," he said. "You pull from the shed. You leave enough for your neighbor to get through. You don't lock the door." Old Frank's jaw worked. He looked at Bertha, then at the preacher, then at me. "And who says where to dig next?" he asked. "I do," I said, and felt the risk in it. "With whoever's willing to carry a shovel and shut his mouth." A laugh ran along the benches. Thanks be small and human. Even Frank's mouth tilted a hair. William nodded, fingers steepled. "We'll try it," he said, "for a fortnight. Then we'll meet again." I left with the taste of old wood still on my tongue, ledger lines ghosting my eyes. Outside, the noon sun hit like a forge. People had already begun whispering the rules to each other the way recipes pass down. 2 at dawn, 1 at dusk, livestock tomorrow. I didn't correct their words. Rules stick better when they come from many mouths. We cut stone that afternoon. James hauled. I set. The boys from the first day were back with wider grins and blistered hands, proud of both. We rolled flattish rocks to the spring's lip and laid them with clay and patience, tapping each into its seat like laying down thoughts you mean to keep. Mary came with a pail of cool sand to sprinkle where feet should stand. She said it kept mud from running and tempers from slipping. By evening, the lip stood clean as a saucer's rim. The water caught the sky like a small, honest thing. At dawn, the line formed before I reached the fence. A girl with pale hair, Emma, Margaret's youngest, held 2 small tin cups like a prayer. Behind her, a ranch hand in cracked boots, then a woman I didn't know, then old Frank, then Bertha, tight as ever. I stood by the lip and watched each draw, a dip, a lift, a pause to let it stop dripping, then step away. No shoving. Quiet talk. That's a good pour, thank you kindly. When Emma reached me, the cups trembling in her small hands, I steadied them by slipping my fingers under the rims. "For your mother?" I asked. She nodded. "She's coughing again. Warm it a little on the stove before she drinks. Not hot, just enough to loosen." I didn't know why I said it. The words came the way water does, in the path that's already cut for it. She looked up, serious. "Are you really a witch?" I shook my head. "No, I'm someone who listens." She thought on that, then nodded once, like a promise. "Me too," she said, and went. After the line thinned, James and I took shovels and walked toward the old creek bed. Sun already finding the back of my neck, iron taste in the air, like a rain that wouldn't quite make it. The bed was a braided scar through the earth, stones showing their bones. We tested the ground with our heels, then with the shovels, then with the shallow trench line I felt under my palms more than saw. A trickle will follow a finger first. Later it owns its own mind. We set seep holes the size of a milk pan, 5 paces apart, working downslope. James dug with a care I admired. Steady, no showy heaves, just work that got done. "Remember the fire year?" he said after a time. "When we took turns with the bucket line and you kept saying to pass slower?" "I was soft in the head," I said. "And right?" he replied, and I let the memory loosen its hard edge. We'd been children trying to save a barn already decided on ash. Still, some of it stood because the line kept steady hands. Near midday, we stopped under a mesquite. I'd brought jerky and a heel of bread. James had a canteen with enough to wet our tongues. We ate without talking. Chewing in heat makes noise you learn to ignore and respect. A lizard rustled, then went still. I closed my eyes, palm on the dirt, and felt the faintest thread of coolness running under where we dug. Thin as a whisper, there all the same. "You feel it?" James asked. "I do," I said. "It'll take the trench if we don't scare it. Cover the first holes with brush when we're not using them. Shade keeps a shy thing brave." He grinned. "I'll tell Frank to lay his hat over it." "Tell him it'll improve his looks," I said. The joke was small and dry. We both smiled like folks who've hung laundry in dust storms. We walked back to town in the long edge of afternoon. Sheets hung limp on lines, dust on every hem. At the blacksmith, Mary's husband, Charles, stood with an iron hinge in his hand and no water to quench it. He lifted it toward me helplessly. I nodded toward a bucket in the shadow. "Use that," I said. "Slowly. Swirl, don't dunk. Iron hates a shock, same as a horse. He followed the motion and watched steam curl like a ghost departing with sense. Evening drew a kind of hush that's not silent so much as people being careful with it. Women rinsed beans, men scrubbed hands at the porch tub. Children carried cups with both palms, learning the heft of what keeps them alive. At dusk, the line formed again, shorter, eyes less wild. I stood until the last cup was filled, then sat on the fence and let my legs dangle the way I had when I was little, watching the yard for my mother coming up the street. William stepped from the path's dark. He didn't climb the fence. He stayed on his side like a man who knows boundaries. "The rules have cooled heads," he said. "For now." "For now" is honest, I said. He looked at my hands. "I said things when you were a girl. Foolish things, and cruel by accident." I waited. He cleared his throat. "The town's shame isn't the words we used. It's what we did with them." I felt something give in me, not forgiveness or anger, something quieter. "Then make different use now?" I said. "Not to me, to the water." He bowed his head, a man with a collar and a lesson that turned like a key. On the third day, a dust devil tore down the main street and rattled the spring fence like an impatient hand. It scattered everyone into doorways. When it passed, a new sound rose, a shout, rough and mean. I walked to it slow. No one should hurry toward the kind of noise that comes from two men squaring their shoulders. Old Frank stood nose to nose with a rancher I didn't know. A barrel lay on its side between them, water darkening the road like a bruise. "He cut in line," Frank said. "It ain't a stagecoach," the rancher spat. "It's worse," Frank snapped. "It's my wife's wash and my cattle both." The crowd began to thicken, the way heat thickens air before a storm. No fists yet, just breath, and the knowledge that once a fist is thrown, it buys more than anyone can pay back. I stepped into the space between their boots. "Pick the barrel up," I said to the rancher. My voice was calm, flat as a plank. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. Then he bent and set the barrel upright. Frank's eyes cut at me. "You gonna tell him who waits here and who don't?" "I'm going to tell you both to draw for each other," I said. "Frank, you'll fill his first. Rancher, you'll carry it to the edge of town and leave it at the Widow Joseph's gate. Then you'll come back and fill your own. That's your fee for stepping in." The rancher opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at the water drying on the dirt, and something in him shifted, the way a knot gives. He nodded once. Frank grumbled, but took the dipper. When the rancher turned toward the widow's lane, the crowd's fists softened back into hands and folks drifted. Mary came to stand beside me, her shoulder a warm weight. "You turned a fight into a chore," she said. "That's a trick worth keeping." "It's not a trick," I said. "It's just remembering what work can do." That evening, James brought a coil of pipe he'd traded for, thin iron lengths with screw collars and a hand pump that had seen better days. "We could set a small lift farther down the trench," he said. "Take some draw off the spring. Keep folks spread." I ran my palm along the threads. "If we do, we'll need to set a skin around it, in case the trench wall slumps. Willow wattle, clay, straw. Give it a throat instead of a mouth." He looked at me with a softness I knew from before the exile, from a time when he carried my school slate for the sake of making me laugh. "You always did think like a river," he said. "Rivers don't much like being thought of," I said. "They like being left alone till you ask right." We built the throat by lanternlight, the two boys holding the wick steady with a hand over the glass to cut the wind. My fingers found the rhythm of weaving willow into a cradle, smearing clay in handfuls that cooled the bones. The pump coughed like an old man, then took, A thin string of water arced into the catch basin. The boys whooped and then clapped their hands over their mouths when I raised an eyebrow. In the days that followed, the town took the rules into itself. I saw it in small ways. A man pausing at a fence to let a woman pass with her pail. A child lifting another child to see minnows that had found their way into the seep cups. A shirt hung in shade rather than sun, so the wash water could be saved to pour on beans. Mary set a jar on her sill to catch night condensation. She laughed at herself, then kept the habit. Charles hammered a windmill frame from scrap and set it on the ridge where Gus lived. It squealed a hymn, and the church ladies winced, and then learned to let the song be. Not everything softened. Bertha kept her mouth tight and her eyes sharp, and when she spoke, it was to question the fairness of any exception made for the sick or the very old. I didn't argue with her. I made my choices with my hands instead, carrying a dipper to Margaret when the cough bent her double, resting a palm on a baby's back while the mother drank. Some folks change by seeing, some change by being seen. One morning, Emma came alone, cups steady now. "Mother sleeps," she said. "I can make porridge without burning it." "You can," I said. "Put the pot on the far edge of the flame and don't rush the stir." She squinted up at me. "When you left, did you miss us?" "I missed the sound of the bell at dusk," I said, "and the way the ground smells when the first raindrops hit dust." I paused. "I miss being known." She nodded like a woman twice her age. "Me too," she said, and went. The complication came the way a horse spooks. Not for nothing, but for something you think was nothing until it wasn't. The spring ran clouded one afternoon, not from mud this time, but from silt so fine the light went milky. It tasted of stone ground to powder. I knelt, and the pulse I'd felt before had a wobble in it, a catch. The trench seeped slowed as if holding its breath. William came with his ledger again. "Maybe we should dam the trench," he said. "Keep what we have." "That would drown it where it lies," I said. "Let me look farther up." James was at my side before I asked. We took the ridge trail that follows the basalt shelves, where the rock steps down like a stair made by a giant with bad patience. The wind had teeth up there, and the light cut hard. 2 miles on, a dry wash opened into a little basin where willows once stood. Their skeletons rattled, empty. In the center, a depression held a ghost of damp. I walked to it, knelt, pressed my ear to the ground the way you listen for a train. There it was, the wobble, a flutter, something blocked and beating against its own blockage. "Could be a slide below," James said. "Clay collapsed." "Could be," I said, and ran my fingers along the basin's low rim, finding a place where a thin shell gave under my nail. The ground out here is like a temper. You can ruin it with one wrong hammer blow. We dug with hands first, then with a short-handled spade James had brought. We didn't go deep. We skimmed. The earth gave with reluctance, grumbling. Then a faint sigh, and the wobble steadied. A dampness feathered the sand, darkening it by degrees. After a time, a bead swelled like a tear and rolled. James let out a breath. "You untied a knot," he said. "The ground tied it," I said. "We just loosened the notion." We stayed till the bead became a line. Then a thin sheen that crept toward the basin's low edge and fell into nothing we could see. The water had found its rightness again. We left it alone. Back in town, the spring had cleared as if we hadn't left it. Folks were calmer than I'd feared. Living with a thing tends to make a person gentler toward its moods. Still, old Frank came and stood close, jaw working. "You keep doing what you're doing, and I'll keep being sorry I didn't listen sooner," he said without looking at me. "I'm not keeping a ledger. I said. He nodded, which is a kind of thanks for men who prefer their words cut square. The choice, when it came, wasn't mine alone. William asked me to stand up at Sunday meeting and say whether I meant to stay. He called it stewardship, a word too big for the soles of my boots. I lay awake the night before with the window open and the shawl over my shoulders, listening for guidance that would not come in thunder. I thought of the work left, the windmill to seat proper, the trench to braid wider, the barrel slats to seal with pitch, the habit to make steady in everyone's hands. I thought of the other hollows I'd passed these 10 years, small bones under hard sky, and whether any of them had a woman with a palm ready to listen. At dawn, I walked to the spring and saw Emma sitting on the rail, heels thumping a soft drummer's time. She hopped down when she saw me. "Will you be our water witch?" she asked, then flushed at her own word. "I mean, will you be our listener?" "I can't be both to everyone," I said. "I can be one to you." She looked past me, out at the ridge. "Mother says the ground keeps what kindness we give it," she whispered. "It pays back in ways we don't always see." Wise child, I thought. Your mother's right. At meeting, the people looked at me like I was both a door and what lay behind it. I told them I would stay through the dry months. I told them I would teach whoever wanted to learn to feel the ground as I did. Not magic, not trickery, just patience and practice and hands unafraid of dirt. I said the rules would become customs if they kept them without me watching. I said the windmill needed proper anchoring, the cisterns needed shade, the trench needed brush laid over it where the sun hit hard. I said if I left it for snow, it would be because the town no longer needed the shape of my listening, only the memory of how to do its own. When I finished, no one clapped. This is a good thing out here. Clapping is for shows. Life is for nods and people getting to their feet. William closed his ledger without writing. Mary took my hand in both of hers and squeezed. Bertha sniffed, which for her may have been agreement. Frank stood as if to say something, then didn't, which may have been apology. James met my eye and dipped his head once, a vow I could read plain. I will help make this hold. Afterward, as folks drifted out to dinner pots and chores, James and I walked to the ridge to set the windmill right. He dug the post hole while I cut brush for wattle around the base. We tamped the earth down with a rounder, then set flat stones to take rain if it ever came. The wheel turned slow, testing. A creak, then another, then a settled rhythm. "Will you come by for supper?" he asked without looking up. "I might," I said, "if there's enough to go around." "There's always enough to go around if you cut the cornbread right," he said, dry as fence cedar, and I smiled into the wind. We stood there a while, not talking, watching the wheel turn, watching the shadow of it spin over the ground, like time marking itself with gentler hands. When the sun dropped, the metal caught a last red gleam. Somewhere below, the spring took a breath and let it go. We headed down before dark, steps careful on the basalt. Near the bottom, I paused and put my palm to the earth, just to see if it still knew me. The hum rose, steady, even, not because of me, but not without me. I thought of the girl who had laughed with a shawl and a pack, and a town's words stuck on her back like burrs. I thought of the woman standing now, with dust at her hems and water at her feet. The lanterns lit one by one in Mercy's hollow. They looked like little wells laid in the sky. Tomorrow would need more work. Tonight could keep its peace. By late summer, Mercy's hollow had settled into a rhythm that sounded almost like prayer. Buckets clinking, windmills creaking, women calling children in from the dust. The air still held dryness, but it was a living kind, not the dead scrape from before. The spring fed slow but sure, and the trench glittered with life. minnows, weeds, once even a small turtle no one knew where it came from. Folks began to laugh again without guilt. You could hear it through open windows at dusk. I spent most days by the lower creek bed, teaching whoever came how to read the earth. James built a little bench under the cottonwood so I could sit while I worked. He said it wasn't right for me to kneel all day on hard ground. I told him the ground didn't mind. Still, I used the bench when the wind picked up, and he never said another word about it. Emma came often. She'd walk barefoot through the shallows, talking to herself like she was counting secrets. One morning she asked, "How do you know when water's near?" I handed her a willow switch, not because I believed in dowsing, but because a hand feels more honest when it's holding something natural. "You don't know," I said. "You listen until you stop expecting an answer," she frowned. "That sounds hard." "It is, but it's the kind of hard that teaches you what sort of person you are." She grinned, flashing a chipped tooth. "Then I'll be good at it." Watching her reminded me of myself at that age. Curious, stubborn, sure the world would eventually explain itself. It never really does, but if you listen close, it hums kindly enough. That evening, thunder rolled from the horizon, the first in months. The smell of rain arrived before the rain itself. Folks came out of their houses, faces turned upward like flowers. When the drops finally fell, the town went quiet, just the sound of it pattering on roofs and tin and grateful skin. James found me by the spring. We stood in the downpour, water dripping from our hair. "Guess your work's done," he said with a smile that didn't quite hide the worry. "Work like this is never done," I said. "Rain passes, people forget." He nodded, eyes tracing the hills where rivulets formed. "You could stay through winter, help set proper cisterns, teach the rest." "I could," I said, "but a thing held too long loses its shape. They need to learn to hold it themselves." He was quiet for a time, just the sound of the rain thickening around us. "You ever get tired of being the one who listens?" "Only when no one else tries." He smiled again, softer this time. "Then maybe I should learn." We didn't speak after that. We just stood until the rain eased to mist and the spring overflowed, water curling into the trench like a living ribbon. The next week brought travelers, lean men with empty canteens, a woman driving 2 goats. Word had spread of a town with water. Mercy's Hollow took them in without asking payment, just a promise to follow the rules. The visitors slept in barns, helped dig new trenches, sang when work went late. You could feel the town growing muscles it didn't know it had. Patience, generosity, memory. But peace is a fragile thing. One evening, the preacher came to me with worry etched deep. "Some folks say the new people drink more than their share," he said. "They want a fence built higher." I looked at the spring shimmering in lamplight. "Fences don't keep thirst out, William. They just make it climb over." He rubbed his temples. "You speak plain, but I've got to keep order." "Order's fine," I said, "but make it out of understanding, not wood." The next morning I gathered the town by the spring. I asked the newcomers to stand with us, not apart. "This water doesn't belong to anyone," I said. "It belongs to whoever respects it. We've learned to listen. Now we teach it forward." For a long while, no one moved. Then Mary stepped from the crowd carrying a jug. She filled it, then handed it to the woman with the goats. "Here," she said. "You look like you've been walking a while." The woman drank, then passed it to a man beside her. Just like that, the air changed, lighter, easier to breathe. I saw William watching, ledger forgotten at his side. Sometimes the sermon happens without the preacher. Later, when dusk came, I walked the ridge alone. The world smelled clean, crickets sang their steady hymn. I thought of all the places I'd been. Bone-dry plains, broken wells, people too proud to bend. Mercy's Hollow had been no different once. Now it was something gentler. Maybe that was all I ever wanted to see. A place learning how to be kind again. James found me up there, boots crunching softly. "You'll be leaving soon," he said. "I will." He didn't argue, just looked at me a while. "Then I'll walk you as far as the cottonwood when you go." "That's far enough," I said, smiling. The moon rose over the valley then, painting the fields silver. The windmill turned slow, its blades sighing. The sound of it was steady and good. If you're listening, friend, stretch your shoulders a little. Take a deep breath. Feel how even stillness can move, like wind through wheat. That night, I dreamed of my mother humming by the fire, her hands dipping cloth into a basin, wringing it gently. When she looked up, she said, "Don't be afraid to leave things better than you found them, Clara, even if no one remembers your name." I woke before dawn, the dream sitting easy in my chest. The air was cool, the kind that carries promise. I went to the spring one last time. The surface was glassy, reflecting the first streaks of light. I touched it, whispered thanks. The water rippled once, as if answering. James was waiting by the cottonwood, a bundle slung over his shoulder. "You sure you won't stay till the frost?" he asked. "I'd just get in the way," I said. "It's your turn now." He nodded, then offered his hand. "If you ever find another place like this, one that's lost its hope, tell them the story of Mercy's Hollow." "I will," I said, "but I'll tell it as theirs, not mine." He smiled at that. That's how stories last. We walked together until the road bent out of sight. Then I went on alone, the sound of the windmill fading behind me like a heart still beating. The land ahead was wide, empty, waiting, and somewhere beneath it, water slept, patient as forgiveness. I came back to Mercy's Hollow once, years later. The town had changed its face. Wider streets, stone wells capped neat, children laughing where dust once ruled. Folks didn't know me at first. I was just another traveler stopping for a drink. That suited me fine. The spring still flowed, though it had moved again, a few yards east, the way living things do when left unchained. I knelt by it, dipped my hands, and the water was cool, sweet, familiar as an old friend who doesn't need words. Someone had carved a small sign near the fence. "Listen first." I smiled. That had been my only sermon. I asked the shopkeeper about the people I once knew. Some gone, some married, some old and content. He said the town never ran dry again, not once. "Funny thing," he added, "every time someone gets angry, the water turns cloudy. Folks say it's the ground reminding us to stay decent." That night I camped under the cottonwood. The windmill still creaked on the ridge, slower now but steady. I thought about James, about Mary, about the girl named Emma who might be grown with children of her own. The stars were kind that night, unblinking and sure. If you're listening, friend, keep a little water nearby and remember what it teaches: to move gentle, to give back, and to listen first. And if a moment in this story reminded you of your own town, leave a quiet note below. You'll find more tales like this waiting in Frontier Women, a collection. The end. Frontier Women, a collection.